Okay, we are on our third and final part, and we will start this section with a little reflection. And I ask you to go back to our original graphic organizer of the 7 tools for developing teacher and teaching, and reflect on the tool that we just discussed, Tool 5. Okay, we are now moving on to Tool 6, which is small group coaching. And small group coaching is basically the title, where you will be working with a small group and basically either reflecting on practice or planning some practice. So the key to this is that it's something that you can do with a small group and they have something in common that they want to work on. So often a team of teachers are working on planning together, and they're in the same part of reflecting and thinking about that lesson. So a small group session could happen now where you coach them through that piece. Or you could be looking at another small group and they're looking at some component of their lesson, one of the pedagogies that they used, or some data that they're looking at, and you could coach them as a small group on how to do instruction. Again, you want to remember that the small group coaching is, again, for a small group, and you don't want to do anything that would be more individualized. Save that when you would be doing an individualized session of coaching. So on our slide, we can see that you can, if you're with a group, this would be an opportunity to turn and talk about how a small group coaching session could be used in your PLC. If you're watching this by yourself, again, you can reflect on this. Okay, at this time, we are going to also ask you to pause the video and take a moment to reflect on Tool 6 on your graphic organizer.
Our final tool for this session is Tool 7, Teaching Studies. And this lends itself to the concept of a learning walk. Again, you're looking at a small group activity, ideally for a PLC. This may be something that you're already doing as a practice in your building, or you have small groups of teachers who are utilizing this practice in the building. But the goal is that you have multiple teachers observing in another teacher's classroom, and you can see the times on there, anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes. So they're getting a chance to see enough of a lesson with the strategies being used and the opportunity to see how it's impacting the learners. But then the goal at the end of this is that you have the observed teacher joining the group, including the facilitator, which would be you or another evaluator in your building, for a facilitated discussion about what was observed in the classroom. Ideally, again, it is good for this teaching tool that we have a teacher of high efficacy. So a veteran teacher, experienced teacher, someone who is going to be willing to receive feedback from their peers, that they feel confident enough in their instructional methods that they will not, it won't be something that would be a negative for them. And you can see the bullets towards the bottom of the slide that these are not required things, but if we want to make them as effective as possible, it is definitely advisable that the teachers share that common professional language to describe what they see as effective teaching. And again, as already referenced, about the observed teacher being skillful and someone who has confidence to be the one to do this. This is a very good strategy if you're wanting to allow your teachers to see other teachers in the building with the skills and the strategies and the methods that they use to impact student learning. But again, there needs to be a protocol that's laid out. There needs to be trust among those who are in this group, both those who are providing the feedback and the teacher who is receiving the feedback. And as a facilitator, it will be very important that you structure that conversation. So when you are meeting in that group to have the facilitated discussion, here are some examples of questions that could be asked. Obviously, you're asking your teachers who have just observed, what patterns did you see? What was going on in that classroom that was effective for instruction? Are there questions you have for this teacher? And definitely you want them to get to the point of reflecting on their own teaching as well. From what they have just seen modeled, what would work well in their classroom to improve things for their students as well. At this time, for the final pause, we ask you to again pause the recording and reflect on the important points on teaching studies. Again, at this time, as we wrap up session 2, you can see on the slide the purpose, the idea being that we want to help teachers to improve their instructional practice and the outcomes for students in a non-evaluative manner. You can see the website link from the Mike Rutherford group where many of these strategies are available, and you are welcome to do additional research on any of the 7. Hopefully, as you reflected on the tools and practices that are showing on the right side of the screen, there were some that you do intrinsically already, or some that are maybe a very major focus of your building and the way that you are helping your teachers to grow as instructors. Maybe you heard one that is not being implemented in your building, and it'd be one to take back and reflect on how that could be utilized. Oftentimes it's good if it's a new practice, again, that you find that core group of teachers that already have a PLC that's established, or where there is established trust. Just like anything else that goes on in the school building, it's often good to have a pilot group that can go and try a strategy rather than trying to implement something across the building. But you may be in a position in your building where there's a specific tool or practice that you heard described during this training that you say, that's when we need to focus on building wide, and this needs to be a high priority for us. So you have your reflection sheet for a good reason, so you can kind of go back and think about maybe some additional questions or areas that you want to dig into a little bit deeper. And again, to try to identify maybe some of these tools that are done well in your building and help your teachers to develop their skills, and maybe 1 or 2 that you would make a focus for growth and for future work in your building. And at this time, we will end the recording for session 2.